Hello everyone, welcome back. In previous videos, I already told you I do not want to fill student information manually. So instead of filling student information manually, I will use a free fake REST API service provided by a website called JSON Placeholder. So let's have a quick look of JSON Placeholder free fake REST API. It provides different information that you can use whenever you want to implement any REST thing in your system. So here in resources you can find there are several resources are available that you can use. Here you can see posts, comments, albums, photos, to-dos and users. So in my case, as I want to fill student information, so I will use this user resource. So here you can see several different records are available for different users. So it has actually 10 records here. So based on these 10 records, I will fill my student list with these. As this API contains 10 user information that we are actually going to use to fill our student table. So to implement this idea, I will add another field to my student table called web ID of type integer that will hold the ID of API users. Here I am not going to map existing ID field with this API user ID, as I already have an ID field of type integer, as it is set to auto increment true and also set as primary key. So I will not going to enter any external ID to my primary key field, because it may happen that a REST API contains any redundant information in it. If it contains, then at the time of insertion it may cause an error, and when it will happen our process will terminate it immediately, and I do not want that. So as you can see here, in my student table I don't have all the API fields, so we are able to map only few API fields with our student table. So first add the web ID to our table. To do that, let's quickly move to Visual Studio Code and open student table. Here at bottom, add our field called web ID of type integer. So as the web ID field is added to our table, now we have to think about how we can call the REST API service and how to handle the response. Here, before going to start, I want to tell you about some more important terms. So as we know, our REST API response will be in JSON, so we need to write code that helps to read JSON values. Here I want to give a master note. Whenever you see a opening and closing bracket, means a square bracket, in your response, it means this is an array. To work with this type of result, we need to create our variable of type JsonArray, and whenever you find opening and closing braces, means curly brackets, it means to handle this we need to create JsonObject type variable, and the actual values is always available as a valid JSON value. It can be in any form of key and value pair or just values with commas. So let's move to student page list, where I already have all the fields available on my layout. Now I want to add an action here, and this action will help us to fetch the records. So now whenever anyone click our action, this will actually going to call this fake REST API service using this URL, and when it gets something in the response, mean these values, these result in a response, I will create another method to read from the response and insert this user information in our student table. So to create an action on any page, we need to follow a syntax. So to create the action syntax, first on a top root level write actions, then we need to decide in which area I actually want to add our action. So write area, and here from the list we can see the option available for us. so we can keep it in a creation area or navigation or processing or reporting. So in my case, actually I'm doing a process, so I will add this action in processing. So now as our area is decided, so we can create our action here. So you can use the actions to do it quickly, or you can just write everything from scratch. So I use the snippet. Now give a name to this action. To do that, write any name here, just like this: student information from fake REST API service. So this is the name. You can give any caption to your action. So in my case, I want to give just get students from REST API. Done. Now in trigger, we have to write our code to send a request to the URL, this URL, and when we get the response, we need to read the response, and then after reading it, we need to fill it, or we need to insert the values in our student table. In these actions, I need to first define some variable to call this service. So to call any service, REST service, we need to create a variable of HttpClient first, and then to handle the response, we need to create another variable of response message type. So HttpResponseMessage, and whatever the response we get it, we can store it in another variable called response of type text. I am not defining length here because a response can contains many text in it. So now we are done with the variables. Let's write a code to call the web service. So to call any REST service, I can just write here HttpClient and its get method. As you can see, its description, it says sends a get request to the resource, identify the request URL. So in this, you have to provide a URL first and then the response variable of type HttpResponseMessage. So here my URL is this, that I copied from the browser URL here, and then our HttpResponseMessage variable. This is done. If everything is fine, then we will get the response in this variable. To read the response from this variable, we can write HttpResponseMessage, and I can use its method called content that actually get the contents of the HTTP response. So here the content, and then I want to read this content as text, so need to provide our text variable here. So if everything was fine, then we will get the response, and the response will be stored in this text variable. So now at this stage, let's check out what we are actually get in our response variable. So here at this stage, I am going to publish this app extension to show you what we get. So press F5 and wait for a few seconds. As you can see here, we get a success message. It says the package has been deployed or published to the server successfully. So now look for student list and see, is there our action in the actions tab? Yeah, this is our action. So when I click on this, we get the response. So everything is going fine till now. We have our response, we send the request to this URL and we get the response. As we get the response, now the next task is to read this response information and store it in the student table. So click OK, go back to Visual Studio Code. Now here I want to do a little change, as this is executed successfully and we get our response in this variable, and we read the content of this in our text variable. now I want to do a change here. I want to write a condition: if this gets something in it, then only the things will be executed. Means if we have the response, then it goes to this body and try to read the content of the response, and when we get the response in our response text, after this I want to store the information in student list. So now here I want to create a local procedure. By using that procedure, I am gonna read everything that is available in the response and then store it to student table. To create a local procedure, I can type local procedure, and then I can write the name of my procedure called read result from response, and in this local procedure I want to pass my response as a parameter. So this is done. Now define its scope. As my local procedure is ready, now let's see what other variables we need to create to read the response. To understand what variable we need to create, let's get back to our idea page. Here, as I already told you, this big bracket represent JsonArray variable we need to create, and the curly braces bracket represent we need to create JsonObject variable. So first create our JsonArray variable, JsonArray, and here the array object is actually a container for any well-formed JSON array. A default JSON array contains an empty JSON array. And what is an empty JSON array? This is the empty JSON array. Now declare another variable of JSON object type, JSON object, and JSON object is also a container for any well-formed JSON object, and it can be a empty also. So this represents the JSON object. And next I want to create another variable called JsonValue, and JsonValue is also a container for any well-formed JSON data. So it can be null also because its default value is null. So every time when we are trying to read the JSON value, we also need to check is it null or not. But most of the time, mostly return response don't contains null, so we can also ignore that. And as we know, this result contains several user information, so it is well obvious we need to do some iteration. For doing iteration, I will take an integer variable named I, and after this I want to create an variable of record type for our student. As we know, our student table has an ID field and set to primary key, and it is an integer type. So I will create another variable here called student ID of type integer. This variable I will use whenever I am going to insert a new record in our student table. So for this procedure I am done with the variables. Now let's start the coding. So first, I told you already we have everything in our response, so I will call this procedure from here. So response variable of this action will send every response text to this method, and from here I can start my coding to read everything from the response and insert record in my student table. So now first read the response in JsonToken variable. So one more variable I need to create called JsonToken. It is also a container for any well-formed JSON data, and its default value is null. So now let's write some code to handle the response. First, read the response in our JSON token variable. To do that, write if JSONToken dot use its method called read from. It actually reads the JSON data from the string into a JSON token variable. So read from our response, then give a scope to it. If we get something, if we read something from this response and get in our JSON token variable, then I will do further process. So now, as it's clearly shows, this is the response array type. So now here I need to check this JSON token is an array or object or a type of value. To do that, write if JSONToken dot, here another method called isArray. As the description said, indicates whether a JSON token represents a JSON array. So if the response represents the JSON array, then the code written in this block will be executed. So the comment for this is that. So now if this JSON token is an array, then we need to convert this JSON token to a type of JSON array. To do that, write JsonArray equal to JSONToken dot asArray. You can see this asArray method converts the value in a JSON token to a JSON array data type. So done. Write the comment here. So as we have the response in array, so let's read every record from this array. So I just increase the size of the font. So to read that, I can use for loop here. For I equal to 0 to JsonArray dot count -1, do begin. So now to get the first record from the array result, that is actually a type of object. To do that, write JsonArray dot get I, the value in JSON token. I am not declaring different JSON token. I will use the same JSON token variable. So as I told you, that is an object. So to check that, I will write if JSONToken dot is object. Then I will do the code in this begin end block. So now if this JSON token is an object, so to convert this JSON token to a JSON object type, to read the actual value, write JsonObject dot JsonObject equal to JsonToken dot as object. So now our code is done till here. So we are getting everything from the first JSON object. So everything is available in this JSON object. So this response ID, name and everything is available in this JSON objects. Now the next thing we need to do is to read the values from the JSON object. To do that, as you can see, the first property here, the key is ID. To read the ID, we need to write code something like this: if JsonObject dot get. So the description says retrieve the value of the property with the given key from a JSON object. So write your key here. In our case, the first key is ID. Then we need to store the result in another variable of type JsonToken. So to do that, I will create another variable of type JToken. I can say value JToken JSON token type, because I do not want to override the value of JSON token variable. So here I will pass my value JToken. Now if everything is correct, if we get something in the JSON token, then this block will be executed. So now first check here, is our JSON token has some values or not. To do that, write if our value JSON token dot is value. It actually indicates whether a JSON token contains a JSON value or not. If it contains, then this code block will be executed. Means if this has a value, we can message the value like this, value JSON token, by converted this as type value data, and then to convert is as type text, because I want to show a message pop up here, so I need to convert it to a type of text. So here I am done with my changes. So stop the debugging and press F5 to deploy the changes and see what we get. To look for the sample code, you can also go to my website where I wrote my articles. Here you can look for how to consume REST API URL. Here I give an example, and this code actually help you to read values from the REST API result, and it also contain different methods, JSON methods, that will help you to read many things as in a type of different formats. Like if you want to read your JSON values as text, then you can call this method. If you want to read boolean, check boolean, get JSON value as boolean. So I have different methods on this list. You can use this code unit to your solution, and you will be able to handle more response types. Our solution is deployed successfully to the server. Let's look for my student list. Now here let's click on the action get a student from REST API. As you can see here, I get 1. When I click OK again, I get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, and done. So it gives me ID of every JSON object. So because it contains 10 record, so ID from 1 to 10, so it gives me that correctly. So now to doing the same thing, not to write this code again and again, I will create another method here called get result JSON value. So local procedure get result JSON value. So here I will pass my first variable of type JsonObject. Then the property means the key value, key name of type text. Then I will give another variable that will return when the value is set in this of type JSON value, and the result of this of type return boolean. So if we get something from this, if it will successfully executed, it will return true. And here in this I will declare my another variable of type JsonToken. As you can see, we are actually reading the value from the JSON token, so I have declared the JSON token here, and this is a type of value, so I will return the value from this, and will store the JSON value in this JValue variable. So let's write the code. If not, my JSON object dot get try to get the property, as we send the key name, try to get the key from the list and passing the JSON token, doing the same thing that I did here. This is equal to this, then exit means if you are not getting anything, then we will exit from this procedure, and if we are get something, then it will execute it further and set the value in our JValue variable, and then exit true means it is executed successfully. So now using this procedure, let's see are we able to get the values or not. So let's write a code for this. So I am commenting our message here and then writing code something like this: if get result JSON value, first we need to pass the JSON object, so I pass JSON object, then the key that I want to read, so here in my case name, so I pass the name here, and the next need to send our JSON value in which the return value will be stored, and then if everything is good, then we get something. So I will write method here and then JSON value, as the name is a type of text, so convert it to as text, and done. Let's check is our this new method is working or not. So stop the debugger, publish your app again, as app has been successfully published. So go back to my student list, refresh it and try to execute the action again. Here you see we are getting the name value. First value is Graham and click OK. Second is Arvind Howell, and this is our last value equivalent to this. So when I click OK, so we are done. So here in our case our code is working properly. So now as we are able to read the values here, now I want to insert the values in our student table. To do that, first I want to do a little more coding here to read the last student ID from the student table. So record student dot reset first, then if record student dot find the last value from the table, then set our student ID value equal to record student dot ID plus 1. So in this student ID I am storing the next ID value. If there is no last record, no record available in the table, so just I am setting my student ID to 1. So here I am done for it, and in this loop now as we started reading everything from here, again I am resetting my student table, then initializing the record by using init function. So here in next line I am inserting the ID first based on our new student ID or incremented value of student ID, and now as I told you, this ID field is going to map based on web ID. So now set the value of other field of my student table based on the response getting from the API. So I told you earlier, this REST API ID is mapped with our web ID field. So here I am setting record student dot web ID equal to value JToken as value dot as integer, because the web ID is type of integer, so it's not giving me any error. And now here I want to set record student dot name equal to JsonValue dot as type of text based on our name field data type. So now quickly write code for other fields. To do that, I'm going to copy this and here as you can see there are several labels. So you can see this is on the first level of array. This is the first object block here from here, and for address we have another level, and for geo we have another level. So we have different levels. I will also show you how you can read the values of different level objects. So first going to insert all the values that are available on the first level. So in our case ID, name, email, phone and website. So just change the value based on that. So after name another value is type email, and then phone, and then the website, so based on this just change the field name dot email dot phone dot website. So we are done with the first level. Now to read second level values. So now to read second level values, first I need to get address JSON object. So to do that I will write if JsonObject dot get, the next key value is address, and then store the value in the JSON token, then begin scope of this. And on this level we have a mapped field called city, as you can see here, city. So to read the value of city, first I will check this JSON token is actually a type of address object or not. So to do that write if JSON token dot is object, then begin, and in this first convert our JSON token to JSON object type. To do that write JSON object equal to JSON token dot as object. So now it's time to read the city value. So I am just copying this method, and from here copy this city key value and change this field name dot city. So at this level we actually only want to read the city value. So now to read this level value that is available in address, means just I can say 2.1 or geo. To do that again write the same code, this same code here, and change this value to geo, and the same thing here. Check this JSON token is an object of type geo, then convert this JSON token to JSON object, and now try to get the values. So here first change city to lat and city to lang, and change the value here latitude and longitude. As you can see here, we are getting error because latitude is a type of decimal, and this here we are converting it to text, so we need to convert it to decimal also. So you can see error is gone. So as we are done by reading all level of keys, and now set other fields of our record student table. So to do that, write code here, record student dot my other field is active to true, then write code called record student dot insert. This method is actually insert a record into the table, and as we are not passing true here, this will not execute the on insert trigger of the table. So here this actually insert the record in our student table, and now as I told you, this REST response contains different records. As I already told you, this JsonArray, this contains different object records, means different user information, and now I need to increment our student ID manually, student ID plus 1. So if I will not write this, what this code will do, this will insert another record in our student list with ID 2. When the loop executed again, when this code is trying to insert the record, it again try to enter another record with the same ID value, that is 2. So it will not insert the record, and at that time we will get an error. So to ignore that error, I will set this ID field value as the next incremented value for the next record. So here I am done with my coding. So just stop the debugger and deploy this solution or publish this solution again. To do that, press F5. So as you can see, the app is successfully published to the server. Let's go back to browser, and here the customer list page is opened automatically. Now look for student list. From this list, need to select our action called get student from REST API. If everything is executing correctly, after clicking this action, you can see our student list table will fill with these user information. So let's click on this student list from API. Voila, you can see all the records are inserted successfully here. Now if you want to take a look to the table, you can write table here 50102, then enter. Here you can see our other field called web ID also. Value for the first record Sachin, you will see that will be empty because we did not insert any values there, so it was set to 0. And for other records, you can see it is set to 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, but here the ID in our case for Lian it is 2, whereas in REST it is 1. So this REST ID I am storing in another field called web ID. And here I am done with this very long video. I hope you understand how you can call a REST API and how you can handle the response of the REST API, how to read it, how to store it in a table. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.